Hello friends, this is Dr. Reyaz, Assistant Professor of English at Jaipal College, JP University, Chapra. Today we'll discuss Geoffrey Chaucer. The poet we know as Chaucer was born Geoffrey de Chaucer. His family name is derived from the French word for shoemaker, as in Chaucer. The literature he left shows us that Chaucer was a man of unusual cultivation. He had a phenomenally busy career as a businessman, soldier, government official, scholar, and author. He was also the father of English verse, called by later poets Dan in Spanish for Don or Lord, as in Don Chaucer, Lord Chaucer. Chaucer was probably born around 1342 or 1343 in London. His family was prosperous and as members of the middle class saw the value in education in order to rise higher in rank. In the years between the transcription of Beowulf and the writing of the Canterbury Tales, which is his most famous work, the kingdoms of Britain experienced repeated attacks by the Vikings, followed by invasion known as the Norman Conquest. It was a very important invasion, very historical significant. The Scandinavian language infiltrated English with the Viking incursions, but never fully took hold. And as late as the 11th century, Anglo-Saxon, that alien tongue that we encountered, we see in history of English literature in Beowulf, it was still there in the language of literature. By the 1390s or so, however, in the wake of the Norman conquest, the English language had changed dramatically and significantly to the point where modern readers can generally understand the famous opening lines from the prologue of the Canterbury Tales. The line begins like this: When that April's with his showers suit, the drought of March hath pierced to the root, and bathed every vein in such liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. We can understand these lines. Chaucer is generally speaking our language. Over here, we are also familiar with the verse form. It is rhymed iambic pentameter, as in didam, 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 didam. Rhymed and rhymed, rhymed and rhymed. Such changes were the result of the invasion of England by the Normans in 1066 AD and the defeat of the Saxon king Harold at Hastings on the English coast. Now, let us take a close look at the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, which is his most important work and very significant. It tells us something about Chaucer's audience. It is a poem which begins with an apostrophe to spring, a direct address to the moment in the year when the world is reborn. This was also a favorite theme of the Italian poet Petrarch and of many romantic poets, since we can notice that Chaucer's audience was cultivated. His readers probably knew Petrarch and were acquainted with the 14th century science of astrology. At that time, astrology was considered as science. Chaucer's poetry draws on the kind of institutional learning that would eventually become concentrated in universities. Despite the poem's title, given later not by Chaucer himself, the action is not set in Canterbury. The title of his work is The Canterbury Tales, but the action is not set in Canterbury. It is important to consider this. It is the site of the Cathedral of Thomas Becket in Kent. We don't know, in fact, if the Pilgrims ever actually reached Canterbury. The poem opens in London in the month of April in 1389. The Pilgrims, including Chaucer himself, are gathered at the Tabard Inn, Inn, on the south bank of the Thames, across the river from St. Paul's Cathedral. It is important to consider that tabard is a French word which means drum, as one would beat a drum to gather a group of people. The pilgrim's guide is Harry Bailey. This band of pilgrims intends to travel by horse the 100-odd miles to Canterbury, to the tomb of Thomas Becket, who was martyred in his cathedral. The purpose of the trip is as much social as religious. The pilgrims travel in a party for safety because brigands and highwaymen lurk outside London. The journey to Kent will probably take them about 4 days. Harry Bailey decrees that each of the 29 pilgrims shall tell two tales on the way to Kent and two tales on the return trip, thereby making 4 tales by each individual. And the important thing is that, or you can say the humorous thing, or the key thing over here is that the best storyteller shall win a prize. This framework recalls Boccaccio's Decameron, a similarly bundled collection of tales with which Chaucer was obviously familiar. For modern readers, the most striking feature of the Pilgrims of the Canterbury Tales is the social diversity. We notice people from all sections of society, from top to bottom. The Anglo-Saxon poetry was generally restricted to 3 classes: Danes, warriors, and peasants. Women were largely invisible. These 3 classes, that is, Danes, warriors, and peasants, are represented in Chaucer's Pilgrims, along with others. There are others as well. Moreover, we perceive in Chaucer's Pilgrims a stratified class system of hierarchy that is similar to our own. The person of highest status in Chaucer's company and the first tale teller, that is why he is telling the first tale, as in the prologue he holds the highest status, social status, is of the knight. He is of a noble class and possesses gentle manners. His tale is told in high literary style, permeated with the subtle codes of courtly love and the stoical Boethian philosophy. Courtly love decrees that love is not merely an emotion, but a set of moves by either party to bring the game to some conclusion, perhaps marriage or even by adultery. These moves were codified, refined, and popularized in medieval romance. Boethius, as I just stated, was a 5th century Christian Roman philosopher who enjoined an acceptance of the fickleness of fortune. According to the Consolation of Philosophy, the Consolation of Philosophy is his magnum opus work. According to the Consolation of Philosophy, we know that fortune was fickle. It was the best defense against fickleness. To know that fortune is fickle, that is how you can tackle the fickleness of fortune. Chaucer translated this work, the Consolation of Philosophy, of Boethius, which explains the tone of worldly gloom we often encounter in his writing. At the bottom of the social heap are the cook, the rave, who is a land agent, the miller, and a shipman. A notch above them are the merchant and the franklin, members of the emergent bourgeoisie. Of the same class are the doctor of physic and sergeant of law. Also, among the 29 are a host of ecclesiastics and churchmen. Ecclesiastics refers to the members of the church, related with the church system, and women, friars, monks, priests, nuns, summoners, partners also, whom Chaucer desperately despises, and a parson. The parson offers what may be the least interesting tale in the set, a series of sermon-like biblical precepts, and the monk's tale offers a catalogue of great people who have fallen from fortune. Generally speaking, the best tales come from the least interesting people. We notice a kind of irony in his writings also. Or the worst people in the company. Some would say that the most interesting pilgrim is the businesswoman, Alucin, the wife of Bath, whom she is most famously known as the wife of Bath, who is the owner of a denim factory. Denim refers to the jeans, denim jeans, from there the term has come. She has had a string of husbands and profited by all of them. The academic in the company, the clerk, possesses 20 huge books, a great and giant library. He can read and write and has mastered the arts of rhetoric and logic. Then, to be able to read and write was a great skill. He is meek in character, nonetheless, but formidable in intellect, and will cross swords with the wife of Bath on the subject of a woman's place. According to wife of Bath, women should be considered superior to men, and the opposite view is held by the person. Each of these pilgrims is identified by his or her trade, profession, or station in life, and thus socially stereotyped. But in each case, the social stereotype is shot through with ironies and individualizing touches that run against the grain. The nun prioress is a good example of this cross-grained quality. She has a senior position in her holy order and is described as very devout. But Chaucer slyly subverts, Chaucer undercuts that description with a portrait of a woman who possesses some qualities that may be at odds with her nun's vocation. She wears, for example, a bracelet with the inscription, "Love conquers all," in quote. Chaucer does not voice any criticism in his description. The unspoken verdict is clear, but affectionate. The nun prioress is like the reader, human. She can make mistakes, like us. We also make mistakes, so his characters also make mistakes. There is no human is perfect. This is what Chaucer reflects in his writing. And bringing these people together, Chaucer is making a point about the social inclusiveness and elasticity of the Christian religion. It can contain all types, even those who are not excessively Christian. Chaucer is also giving us a sense of the dynamism and complexity of English society. The Pilgrims' tales reflect the pilgrims and, in the process, offer a microcosm of a complex but familiar world to us. The 18th century poet John Dryden said of the Canterbury Tales, and I am quoting here, is God's plenty, unquote, by which he meant that the poem offered readers the world. It seems almost miraculous that Chaucer can make these connections with us across time and in the process of writing about his world reflect our own. Thank you so much.